All right, and we're live. Let me know if you guys can hear me. I was having a little bit of trouble with the audio, but we got our first fight of the night here. We got a great card in Madison Square Garden. We got the Dan Hooker fight. Dan Hooker versus, let's see, what's this guy's name again? Um, Dan Hooker versus Claudio Puelles. That should be a good fight. Dan Hooker, I like him as a fighter and stuff, but he hasn't been able to win a fight recently. He just seems to be on the bad end of a lot of decisions. So let's see what happens with him tonight. That Kimura from Islam Makhachev was sick of. I love seeing that Kimura. That was beautifully set up. He did it from a reverse half guard where your underhook turns into a Kimura dilemma. And if you block the guy's knee from passing, then he gives you the Kimura. So good stuff there. Dan Hooker is about to step into the octagon. Should be a good fight. This guy, Claudio Puelles, he seems to keep on knee barring everybody that he gets into the fight with. So I wonder if that will be a conversation had in the fights tonight. All right, both fighters are in the octagon. The tail of the tape, Dan Hooker's 32, Claudio is 26. Dan Hooker's 6 feet tall, Claudio 5'10". They both weigh in 156 to 155. Dan Hooker 75-inch reach, Claudio 72-inch reach. Dan Hooker more of a striker. Looks like this Claudio guy is more of a grappler. Bruce Buffer coming out strong in Madison Square Garden, sold out packed arena. Everybody's on their feet. It's an exciting card. Very, very compelling. The next fights with Adesanya and Pereira. I posted my predictions yesterday. We'll see if they came true. The predictions were that hello, somebody joined the stream. Welcome. Make sure you throw something in the chat. My predictions are Pereira beats Israel Adesanya, Wei Li beats Carla Esparza, and Dustin Poirier beats Michael Chandler. But it's hard to predict fights where you don't know the fighters. And in this one, I've seen Dan Hooker fight many times before, but I haven't seen this guy Claudio fight. The difficult thing about these leg locks, like knee bars and heel hooks, is you really need your knees to be able to walk. If you dislocate an elbow, it's a 6-week recovery and it's not that big of a deal. But for, a ACL, MCL, meniscus reconstruction, first round, starting right now. Dan Hooker takes the center of the octagon, looking really relaxed. Looks like they're going to have an open stance here where Dan Hooker is going to be in the orthodox and Puelles is going to be in the southpaw. And you could just see that Dan Hooker definitely wants to make this more of a striking fight, and definitely use his strikes, his kicks, his punches. And Puelas is not looking for a striking bout. He's looking for a grappling match here. You could also see almost the youth in Puelas, where he's a 26-year-old kid, and Dan Hooker just looks a little bit more experienced, a little bit more comfortable in the big arena. And Dan Hooker looking to be the bigger fighter, the larger fighter, kind of use his size, use his range, use his reach, and is really having a nice long guard, throwing nice long punches, being nice and long, trying to use a jab from an already big guard out there, and trying to use the long weapons of the front kicks, the round kicks, and really kind of fighting confidently here. But the thing about a long guard is it might be good for your range. Up, Puelo's looking for an Imanari roll type situation here. Grabs onto the leg of Dan Hooker, and we'll see. My friend has Puelas winning by first round submission. So let's see here. Puelas going in for the leg. Dan Hooker defending well here. Puelas wants to roll and get his hips over to the other side here. Sweep him using his hips. Good. Now he's in a reversed leg locking position. There is a little bit of a danger of a back take, but Dan Hooker needs to be able to free his knee in this position for that to happen. But you could see Puelas definitely understands this leg locking scenario really well. Now he's transitioning into the cross ashigarami position. And this might be a really difficult situation for Dan Hooker, because when you understand this position better than your opponent, heel hook, this might be over. This might be it right here. This might be the end of the fight. Dan Hooker's doing the last hand fighting that he could do in this position. Oh, and Puelas is turning into a knee bar here. This is big problems for Dan Hooker. Puelas has a deep bite here on a knee bar from this cross ashigarami type position. Up, Dan Hooker looks like he might have slipped his knee out here. Very crafty. He's got to be careful, though. Puelas can pull it back in at any time. This is a really kind of close position. Oh, it looks like Dan Hooker's knee is out of here. Yes, it is. Whew. And Dan Hooker escapes just by the skin of his teeth here. And it looks like he trained this position a lot. Oh, but he gets up and his leg is a little bit wobbly. I wonder what the condition is of that right leg. If he tore anything in there. Puelas looking to Imanari roll once again, looking for a double Koichi sweep. Dan Hooker backing away and telling him to stand back up. 43 seconds left in this first round. I wonder how compromised Dan Hooker's right knee is here. It looks like it's kind of injured. 30 seconds left. There's a couple really deep bites on his leg. Hard to say. Oh, and a nice two right down the middle from Dan Hooker there on Puelas' chin. "13 seconds left in the first round." My friend that bet that Puelas would get a finish in the first round doesn't look like he's going to make do on his bet. And time. That's the end of the first round. Who do you give that round to? I guess you got to give it to Puelas. Dan Hooker won in the striking category, but interesting. His corner is discussing with him right now what's going on with his knee. I really wonder what they're saying. If you hear what they're saying, please let me know. What fight is happening right now, says that one Star Wars nerd. It is the Dan Hooker versus Claudio Puelas fight. I hope that helps you. And if you could throw a subscribe, please do so.
Listen, left hand. Jab, 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 left hand.
Looks like they're telling Dan Hooker to go back to the jab and to throw those straight punches once again. But I really am curious what the state of Dan Hooker's knee is. That's part of the danger of taking this fight against a skilled leg locker. Is and Dan Hooker opens the round by throwing that right leg to kind of say, "I'm not injured. My leg is fine." Claudio Puel is looking for the legs, looking to take down Dan Hooker. Really kind of fascinating grappler versus striker matchup here. Dan Hooker definitely closing in on the strikes here. Ooh, and a nice punch right to Claudio Puel's face. Another one right to, might have broken his nose. This isn't good for Claudio Puelas. Dan Hooker is really backing away on Claudio's. Oh, and a nice hook from Dan Hooker. Literally like his name. And this is not looking good for Claudio Puelas. It looks like Dan Hooker sort of adapted to what Claudio is going to try to do as far as the leg locks are concerned. And I don't know. Claudio Puelas, though, snatches an ankle here. Dan Hooker looking for a guillotine. And Claudio Puelas just uses it to get to the ground, like pulls guard with the guillotine just to make it a fight on the ground. And Dan Hooker wants none of this fight on the ground. It's kind of whack to me that you can't just let the fight play out. You know, if Claudio Puelas is trying to get the fight on the ground, you know, Dan Hooker can just back away and ask him to stand up, and the referee has to stand them back up. And Puelas goes in again for another ankle pick kind of takedown. Dan Hooker just defends it and walks away from him. It seems to be the theme that's happened many, many times in this fight. Puelas just doesn't have the skills to really match Dan Hooker on the feet. But up there, he shoots in for a nice double leg, turned to single leg. Dan Hooker sprawling. Dan Hooker can't exactly just get up and walk away from this scenario, but now he can, as Puelas just sort of let go of that single leg. 1 minute, 42 seconds left. Ooh, and a nice shot to the liver, it seemed like, on Claudio Puelas. Puelas pulled guard, but it looked like he was just pulling guard to mask the fact that he hit him in the liver. And Claudio Puelas looks like he's really breathing hard here. This is an interesting kind of thing. Claudio Puelas literally doing like a cartwheel, lunging his legs at Dan Hooker. Oh, and the referee waves it off. Dan Hooker seems to have hit him in the liver again. Dan Hooker finally wins a fight here. And Claudio Puelles pulls guard again. And the referee waves it off. Kind of a crazy, crazy fight. Me personally, I think you should just let the fighters do whatever they want. I think if the grappler wants to sit on the ground and kind of pull guard, hey, Ken Shalay says, "That's my boy. Love you, Dad." That they should just have to engage at all times. Like the fact that Dan Hooker can defend the takedown and then like get up and run away from the guy, and then the referee has to stand them back up over and over and over again. You know, it's just like let the fight play out how it would play out. You see Israel Adesanya, who is the teammate of Dan Hooker, celebrating, going like this in the background. I wonder, though, sincerely, how Dan Hooker's knee is, because that did not look like a good situation for his knee. He was in deep in a heel hook knee bar kind of situation. If you guys are watching, please throw a subscribe in. Would really appreciate that. And we got a victory for Dan Hooker. Unbelievable. Hopefully that brings him back into the win category, and you could see him fight someone more so in the top 10. And here he is on his interview with Joe Rogan.
God did. You did a fantastic job tonight of keeping him in your range.
Pardon me. Well, that does it for that fight. The Frankie Edgar fight is next, which should be interesting. Who's Frankie Edgar fighting? It's going to be Chris Gutierrez. Should be an interesting fight. This will be Frankie Edgar's last fight. Frankie Edgar has the most time in the UFC octagon than any fighter ever in the history of, I think, fighting in general, and not only the UFC, but in all of MMA. So you literally can't get more experience than Frankie Edgar. And Frankie Edgar's definitely a legend. He's tightly connected to the Renzo Gracie team, and owns a gym up there as well. Looks like they're showing some ads. We got the Wakanda Forever ad. I wonder how that movie is with the main character who died from the last one, who I've also forgotten his name. I mean, don't call me a racist for saying this, but I sort of really didn't like Black Panther the last time. And I've heard a couple of people say that the new Black Panther kind of sucks. So, oh, but what is this? Kamaru Usman is in the Black Panther? That's wild. Oh, and there's Kamaru Usman and his family. Oh, and there's the chick from Black Panther. Lupita Nyong, I guess, is her name. Aljamain Sterling, they're showing. Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards doing the famous headshot dead symbol from winning his last fight, becoming the 170-pound champ with his headshot. It's interesting. Just in, I mean, I hate to say this, but just in the fashion choices that they chose, Kamaru Usman's wearing like a full suit. Everything's covered. He's got like a chain thing going on. He's in all black. He's got glasses that are like this big on his head. And before, when he was the champion, He would show up like shirtless and much more exposed and all that stuff. And then they showed the champion of the 135-pound division, Aljamain Sterling, and he was like that, shirtless, exposed. Um, and it's just interesting that it seems like their champion status or their, I don't know, something is represented by what they're wearing. I guess it makes a statement. But whatever. I really don't care about that shit. Anyway, it's cool though. They're showing the New York City skyline and the New York City taxis, a famous staple in New York. I used to live in New York for most of my life. Lived in New York for the first 18 years of my life. New York is an awesome place. Lived in Manhattan. And I was born in Queens. So, there's a certain special feeling too about Madison Square Garden. All of the greatest fighters of all time fought in Madison Square Garden. And there is a special kind of feeling with that arena and with that stadium. And that's where this card is being held tonight. So, everyone who's on it has sort of this same special obligation type feeling. They're showing Israel Adesanya. It says he arrived at 8 o'clock p.m. Israel Adesanya has looked pretty nervous, in my opinion, in this upcoming fight. A couple things that I noticed and thought were interesting: stare down, and if you see, like a lot of times in the final stare downs, right before the actual fight happens, you can't help but give a bit of a tell as far as like what your game plan is. You can't wait to get your hands on that person. You've been training with them in your mind for months and months and months. And now it's finally time to make that happen. So you see a lot of times guys almost give away their game plan with what they're going to do with their fists. If they're like shaking their fist really hard like this, there's some plan about how they're going to use their right hand in this case. You guys might see it as my left, but camera's flipped. But that's just sort of what I noticed. It also might be a if Schnee backwards a tell because Israel Adesanya in his previous fights with Alex Pereira said that he was spamming his right hand too much, and that was one of the reasons why Pereira won. So it might be a bit of him saying, I'm going to be doing this again, and then him changing it and switching it up on him. But I think overall, you've been able to tell how Israel Adesanya has been sort of worried about this whole fight. Usually people have this intimidating or like feeling where they're intimidated by Adesanya, and then it looks like it was switched this fight where Adesanya is intimidated by this guy. And there's a certain thing in fighting where if a guy has beaten you in the past and especially knocked you unconscious or submitted you, that like really stays and sticks in your mind. And you can't, you could get over it. You could, get past it. You could overcome it, but you'll never forget it. So it will always stay in Israel Adesanya's mind that he's lost twice to this guy. And the unfortunate thing almost is that even if he wins tonight, his record would be 1-2. Would be 1-2 against this guy. So he would still have a losing record against him. So I don't know what to tell you. Ken Sholay says Batman died. The guy who does the voice for the animation, the voice of Batman for the last 30 years. Caleb says Wakanda forever. Love that. Love that. Caleb's part of a group chat that I'm in, and they're clowning on me for saying Wakanda forever sucked. That's pretty funny. But it's a shame that friggin' Batman died. Let me see. Who was the voice? Batman. Yeah, Kevin Conroy. Man, rest in peace, Kevin Conroy. You know, unfortunately, there's been quite a few. Yeah, there's been quite a few deaths lately. Shout out to my friend Bronx, who was at the Gracie Baja Kissimmee School. They buried him in his gi and promoted him to black belt today. And may he rest in peace. He was a really good guy, and he owned a dog breeding company. So I wonder what's going to happen with his dogs. He just had a son, and man, it's such a sad situation. He flew off of his motorcycle and unfortunately died. So rest in peace to Kevin Costner and my friend Bronx. He was a boxing coach, and he loved martial arts and jiu-jitsu as well. So, man, rest in peace to those guys. But anyway, we got Chris Gutierrez coming in, looking pretty sharp so far in his walkout, hugging his coaches, giving his coach a kiss on the head, and looks confident and ready to go. I wonder if Caleb is still watching. Saying Wakanda forever sucked. I'm literally in the group chat right now. That's pretty funny. They're clowning on me for saying Wakanda forever sucked. Look at this. This is like Inception. I'll probably get copyrighted with my own video here. All right. Anyway, Chris Gutierrez is in the octagon. He's dancing around the octagon. You know, when you are a fighter, you envision this moment so much, you plan this moment so much, and you really think out and plan out what you're going to do. Visualization is a big thing for fighters, and most, if not all, coaches preach this. So they have an exact plan of what they're going to do when they get into the octagon, and they practice it beforehand. And here comes Frankie Edgar, where he's running out to the octagon. The security is running as fast as they can to run with him. His poor security is much older than him and could barely keep up with him. Frankie Edgar coming out with such a look and feeling of intensity. What a friggin' legend. All fighters have to pay respect to Frankie Edgar. And he's the former UFC lightweight champion. He is the most experienced fighter in the UFC via octagon time. And man, you just can't get more experienced than Frankie Edgar. You know, he had this super long streak where he was never knocked out ever. And then he got knocked out by Brian Ortega. And I just wonder if his chin is ever the same since. All right. Man, Frankie Edgar is out here with such an intensity. It's got to be a crazy feeling for it to be your last fight like this. Frankie Edgar's 41 to Chris Gutierrez's 31. Frankie Edgar 5'6", Chris 5'9". They're fighting in the 135-pound division. And Frankie Edgar has a 68-inch reach to Chris Gutierrez's 67-inch reach. Bruce Buffer out there announcing, doing his thing. By the way, if you guys want to check out my Submission Land instructionals, I have Bruce Buffer doing the announcing for those. I have a couple videos on my YouTube channel that are doing really well in like the thousands of views kind of category. The most underrated submission in MMA. I got the secret to Ronda Rousey's armbar and the #1 submission in BJJ. And those are all in my Submission Land instructional. And Bruce Buffer does the introduction for that instructional. It's kind of cool. So if you want, please check that out as well. Frankie Edgar in here with his arms in the air, looking like he already won the fight. It's got to be such a surreal feeling, sort of knowing that this is your last fight. His wife and kids are there watching him. And round one, here we go. Should be an interesting fight. You know, it's hard to get that story tale ending in your career, and usually it looks pretty ugly at the end of your career. But let's see if Frankie Edgar can make that happen tonight. Both fighters coming out in the orthodox stance. It's interesting. Chris Gutierrez looks much bigger than Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar 5'6", and Chris Gutierrez 5'9" in the tail of the tape. But it's this interesting thing where it said that Frankie Edgar actually had the longer reach. So you have these odd situations like an Alexander Volkanovski and a Max Holloway, where Volkanovski is much shorter than Holloway. Ooh, a couple nice punches on Frankie Edgar's face here. Frankie just seems to eat them all. Ooh, and a nice leg kick on Frankie Edgar's leg. A bad start to this first round so far for Frankie Edgar. Frankie now more biting on Chris Gutierrez's feints, knowing that he has to defend them or he will get tagged, and sort of interrupting that rhythm and flow that you saw him come out with in the beginning of that first round. Seems to recompose himself now and take a deep breath here. 3 minutes, 33 seconds left in this first round. Lots of feints from both fighters here, being cautious about how they close the distance. Frankie Edgar controlling the majority of the octagon, still moving great, moving really fast. Throws a high kick to Chris Gutierrez. Gutierrez showing many different looks here, showing the uppercut. Oh, showing a major knee. Oh my goodness. Frankie Edgar gets knocked out cold in a horrible, terrible, absolutely devastating fashion. Oh my gosh. Like I was saying, not many story tale endings exist in MMA. Dear Lord. Well, that didn't go so well for Frankie Edgar. Yikes. Yikes. He got tagged a couple times in the beginning of that fight, and then Oof, that did not look good. Frankie, you're clearly very upset. Yikes. And it looks like Frankie is unsure of what happened. He has a nice embrace with his opponent here, and I guess his opponent is telling him how much love and respect he has for him. But Frankie Edgar just looks sort of confused and like he doesn't know what's going on. Ay, 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 that's a scary situation. And, it just looked like Frankie Edgar got tagged a couple times. And even though it looked like he was moving good, moving fast, oh man, Chris Gutierrez goes to try to pick him up and carry him around the octagon, and Frankie Edgar doesn't want any of it. And man, rough situation for Frankie Edgar. All right, they're showing the replay. Oh my goodness. Oh man. Looks like Frankie Edgar was just about to start to change levels into a double leg. And he gets knocked out. Here it is again. Oh my god. You saw the ripple effect go through his head. Ah, that hurts. I feel for Frankie Edgar on that one. And there is this like bittersweet sort of feeling there, even from Chris Gutierrez in the octagon. Anyway, I will be back for the final three fights. Chris Gutierrez seems to be tearing up and seems to be upset with himself that he won. Anyway, I will be back for the main three fights of the evening. Much love, and I will see you soon.